There you are, my friends. Welcome back. Now, before the break, you were witnessing my greatest TV humiliation. I described him as a Donald Trump, President Trump, and not to, a figure from a children's television programme one day in the future. Right. In the future, this is true, the heads of the Justice Department and the FBI will no doubt be brought to Capitol Hill to testify about the historic decision to raid a former president's home. You see, late last night, Trump's private residence was raided. Now, we don't yet know too much about what was in that search warrant, but we do know that the raid concerned the removal of classified documents from the White House that Trump allegedly took with him when he left office last year. This is what Trump said in a statement. I love this. These are dark times for our nation as my beautiful home in Palm Beach, Florida is currently under siege, raided and occupied by a large group of FBI agents. Nothing like this has ever happened to a president of the United States before. Such an assault could only take place in broken third world countries. Sadly, America has now become one of those countries, corrupt at a level not seen before. They even broke into my safe. So what was in that safe? I'm joined now by President Trump's former senior advisor, Jason Miller. How are you, Jason?
Jeremy, good to be with you.
I'm sorry about my inability to say his name. Let's cut to the chase. How long did you work with Donald Trump?
So I worked for the president both the 2016 campaign and the 2020 campaign, and then for about 5 or 6 months after he left office.
Quite possibly the most divisive, like Johnson, but on a far greater scale. Loved and loathed in equal measure. I remind people in this country that 74 million people voted for him in the last election. Now, currently under investigation over that Capitol Hill riot. Last week we saw a situation where Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, apparently nothing to do with Biden. Last night, the FBI raided an ex-president's residence. Biden's hand in this or not?
I don't think Biden directly. This is not going to help Biden. If anything, it's going to backfire. But I do think that it's the political appointees that Joe Biden has put at the DOJ and other places that had a hand in this. I mean, the fact that this happened, we've never had something like this in American history. This is what happens in Venezuela or Cuba or with the CCP in China. And we're now a laughingstock of the world at what we're doing for political retribution.
You talk about political retribution, presumably, from this side of the pond, I would look at it and go, they're doing everything they can to prove that he broke the law, which means he won't be able to stand for public office. Would that be fair?
That's absolutely true. That's what we're seeing with the January 6 hearings. That's what we're seeing with this effort with the FBI agents doing their raid last night. It's what we see with the Democrats on Capitol Hill going after his tax returns. They're going to do everything they can to stop him for 2024. What a lot of folks might not realize, he's leading in the primary, President Trump is, and also a lot of polls show him leading Joe Biden. So Joe Biden's in a pretty bad place right now, and Donald Trump is setting up for a victory. That's why I think the deep state, that's why I think the bureaucracy, they're coming after him with everything they have.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? You said to me during the break that I said, is he going to stand? I think he'll stand. What do you think? Do you think he'll stand? Because you said after last night, the Republicans are absolutely raging.
Absolutely. I think that before last night, I'd say it was maybe in the 60-40, maybe 70-30 range. I think after last night, I think it's almost certain that President Trump runs again. And I think the reason being is he realizes that once you start attacking the swamp, once you start trying to change things, they're never going to stop shooting at you.
Isn't it true to say that any candidate that would try and take that nomination from him would need his acceptance, his support? He has this amazing control over the Republican Party. But what would you say to the critics who say he left office in disgrace? I mean, I read something today, apparently he flushed evidence down the toilet. You don't say toilet. I don't know what you say, loo, whatever. Bathroom. Apparently, there is indeed the very toilet that President Trump allegedly flushed evidence down. Just man to man, you and me. Is he as devious? Is he as duplicitous as everybody makes out? What's the real man? You know the real man.
I do. I think he's one of the things is he's the exact same off camera as he is on. And I'll tell you, that's different from any other politician I've ever worked with. And I've done that for much of the last 20, almost 30 years. You always know where you stand with Trump. There's no guessing game. He'll tell you to your face. There have been plenty of times he said, Jason, this is a great idea. Plenty of times where he said, this is a terrible idea. There's never a guessing game. But the thing about him going and running, I think a lot of people forget this point. Not only does he have a firm grip of the Republican base right now, keep in mind, in 2020, he actually set the modern record for votes with Hispanic Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans for Republican. Best ever since 1972. I don't think that there's another Republican that can win in blue states, Democrat states, the same way that Trump can.
Does he demand total loyalty? There was something in a newspaper I read the week. You know, New York Times, I think, said, you know, he demands his generals support him. It was just this extraordinary rhetoric. I mean, he again, from this side of the pond, you know, he sacked almost everybody all the time, and yet leaves office, OK, left office, didn't win, made a big thing about that, did he? I mean, there's so much that's, it sounds a terrible thing to say, fascinating about this man, but if you look at what happened, we're sat here and we're saying, if there was an election in the United States of America tomorrow, he would be the next president of the United States. What does that say about the American people?
What it says is the American people, at the time in 2020, they were told that if you just stop tweeting mean things, if we just restore sensibility and a really nice guy like Uncle Joe, everything is going to go back to normalcy in the world. We're not going to have invasions. We're not going to have a crisis at our southern border. There'll be no inflation. Well, guess what? The exact opposite has happened. I want to go back to a point that you said a moment ago about the absolute loyalty, because I think if you're trying to understand what Trump is about, if you're in the room with him, you're expected to have an opinion. He'll go around, doesn't matter if you're the most senior person, the most junior person. He'll look in your eye, say, what's your opinion on this position? He's fine if someone stands up and says, no, I think you're wrong, if you have a good idea or a solution to go forward. It's easy for someone who works for a politician to say no, but if you have nothing to back it up, then he'll tell you to get lost.
He's box office, isn't he? I mean, he's one of those people that, as I said at the beginning of our chat, Jason, demands 100% loyalty. You love him or you loathe him. So let's say he stands. You think he will?
I think so.
And if he wins, will the call come to Jason Miller? Will you go back and work with him again?
Oh, the call will come before he actually wins. It will be to help him. I've already told him that if he runs, I'll be there to help him. Absolutely. I'm always his #1 biggest wingman, and I'm ready to go into battle again.
Do you think that the American people can forgive January the 6th? Do you think enough of them can put that behind them? Because we haven't got long. You're right. Again, from this side of the pond, Joe Biden's been a huge disappointment. Kamala Harris has disappeared out of view.
So that's a really smart question, because there's always the matchup. Are you going to go with the Joe Biden, who tanked the economy, allowed Putin to roll into Ukraine, China, just a matter of minutes, I'm guessing, until they took over Taiwan? Maybe it's by the end of this show. You stack that up against what Trump was able to do, and people say, you know what, we can go and we're going to pick how does it impact me and my family. That's what all comes down to, the pocketbook. Look, the wealth disparity is still getting bigger and bigger. The inflation, not just hurting folks here in the UK, really crushing people in the US. They're going to hey, I'm not going to say that what happened on January 6th should be swept under the rug. No. It was a terrible day for America. But the bad actors, the people who planned and plotted this thing, they weren't part of a Trump movement, a Trump agenda. He has no time for the lawlessness and the craziness. If you broke a law, if you assaulted someone...
Very quickly, could he have been more vocal in criticising and trying to stop it? That's the question, surely.
Sure. But do I think it fundamentally would have changed the outcome on that day? No. Could he have spoken out earlier? I do think so. So
if he wins in 2024 and you get a job, you'll come back on the show, will you?
I'll always come back.
A real pleasure, seriously. I'd love to have had more time. Jason Miller, that raid last night on Donald Trump's home, Jason says, and this is really interesting, will galvanise the Republicans behind Trump. He said to us just then, you know, before last night, maybe 60-40, Jason is convinced that Donald Trump will stand again in 2024. And judging by what we see in the polls, not only would he stand, he'll win. Maybe Johnson will make a comeback. Listen.